you very much for appearing on our video and our podcast today. So tell me where we are, Mr. Barnes.
We are in one of my favorite places in all of the United States, and that is the state capitol building of the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona is the 48th state out of 50, and we joined the Union in 1912. So we're the last state in the mainland to come around. Alaska and Hawaii came in 40 years later. And when the state was founded, this was a wild frontier of very few people and very little money, which is reflected in our capital, really. I mean, of the capitals of the United States, most of them are pretty grand and even a bit extravagant. This one is not grand and not extravagant. It reflects the humble nature of the turn of the century when it was built right after the 1900s. It uses all Arizona stone and all that, and so it's got symbolisms. But it's just, you know, if you go to Texas or if you go to Sacramento in California, you know, those are really nice buildings. This is not so much. As a matter of fact, the original building is a museum. Now, we don't even actually use it.
Oh, okay.
It's for school kids to come in and learn about Arizona, and the original House and Senate chambers are there, and it looks like going back to first grade with little desks and everything else. It's kind of fun. And then the buildings on both sides of me were built in the 1960s to accommodate the House and Senate. So it was used until the 1960s, and then this was built. And the governor's office was built in the 1970s, and it's behind this building, just out of our eyesight. It's a 9-story building, and the governor's on top. Again, not very sexy, just kind of dumb modern from the 1970s, but it's still ours, and we're appreciative of it.
Nice. So on this side we've got the Senate, and on this side the House of Representatives. Are they mirror images of each other?
Yeah, the buildings are almost identical. The floors are different, and later we'll go see them.
Okay.
But there's 30 people that are elected to be in our state Senate, and there are 60 in the state House. So while the building footprints are the same, it's more crowded in that one because there's twice as many elected people, plus the staff to go along with it. Mm-hmm. There are hearing rooms in the bottom, and then on the second level is the actual floor where the grandeur should be, and the votes take place and the debate takes place. And then above that, the third floor, they're a 3-story building. The third floor are offices for the members. So they, we make fun of them because they're really not that attractive. But once again, it's just kind of the theme around here. When I was a member of the legislature so long ago, 30 years ago, it was well before our centennial as a state, well before 2012 when we celebrated our centennial. And way back in 1990s when I was here, we were having debates about doing something special for our state capitol for the centennial celebration. And it was always going to cost money, and we always kicked the can down the road because the urgent drove out the important. And we were going to tear these down and build a whole new capitol to celebrate our centennial. But we didn't because we didn't have any money then, and no one would commit to it later. And so here we are. We went right through the centennial. We have the same old buildings that are still not that functional. But as I say, they're ours, and Arizona school children come here and they get their baptism into what the state capitol is like, and away we go.
Great.
We're standing between the Senate and the House. As you can see, there are folks from schools around Arizona doing their thing. And this is the way it looks on a normal legislative day because this, after all, is the people's capital. But the thing to understand about self-governance, and I think it's true no matter where you are in the free world, is it really depends on human beings interacting with one another. So where does that interaction take place? It's really not so much in the committee hearings or even on the floor of the House or the Senate. It's actually in private meetings outside of those spots. And a lot of that takes place right here. Mm-hmm. We have the legislature in Arizona comes in January and exits sometime in April, May normally. And that's the most perfect weather in the whole United States, in Phoenix, Arizona, from January through April. And so we stand out here a lot and do business. Most state capitals are under a dome, and then people will congregate indoors, especially in the wintertime, because after all, usually the weather is horrible in the rest of the United States. But our weather here is perfect. So we do business here.
Lovely today.
I know. What is it? It's 65 degrees today and sunny. It's gorgeous. We're out here. So if you stood out here long enough, you would see lobbyists and members and staffers and folks talking about bills and making agreements to do things on legislation. Also, if I might point you this way, this big grass area, there's another one like it over there. This is generally where interest groups come set up lunch on a typical day, so that the Home Builders Association of Arizona that wants the attention of legislators on legislation that matters to home building. It's a very big business in Arizona. They might bring big white tents and barbecue and food and they feed everybody. And it's part of the culture in Arizona of how we are interacting with our elected officials. Everybody's busy during the day, so if you're giving them a barbecue sandwich of some sort, they will probably stop what they're doing and they'll come out. And you might be able to say, how's your lunch? And, oh, by the way, what about that bill we're interested in? So the conversations take place. This space in front of the old Capitol building and these grass areas are where a lot of the actual deal making that leads to law takes place. I wanted you to see her. So there's a statue, a bust of her, right here on the second floor. She served here for over 50 years and was just the most genuine, authentic, old Arizona classic. Pragmatic, interesting. Even in her 80s, she always took the stairs. She never took the elevator. Very interesting woman. So we created a bust of her because we tried to honor her, and we put her there because her husband is that middle picture right there. Because remember, he was here before her. So we have her looking at him, and I notice her arms are folded. Yeah. So it kind of feels like a message of some sort. She was alive before our statehood. Yeah. She was born before we were a state, and yet she serves here, and I got to serve with her. It was my blessing. I was only 27 years old when I was here as a member, and it was fun to sit next to her on the floor and to get a sense of her graciousness about the honor of this place. And I never lost that. That's a very important thing. This is our state Senate chamber, and I'm hoping the camera can see some of it. It has a certain somberness to it, a certain reverence to it. Now it's quiet now because no one's here. But even when the senators are engaged, it generally is a relatively quiet thing. It's kind of interesting. You think there might be a lot of, table pounding and yelling, and every now and then that happens. But for the most part, the Senate in Arizona is a pretty decorum kind of thing. The State House is a little different. The joke is that the State House runs in gangs, and the Senate is 30 individual kingdoms, and they all behave that way. So they something happens when you've served in the State House, and then you come to the State Senate and you serve in the State Senate. You go from being loud and trying to get attention to being some sort of reverent, almost like you're in a religious thing. I don't know why it happens. It happened to me when I was in the House and the Senate. It's just a different culture in the Senate than it is the House. I think that's probably true of a lot of places, but in Arizona it's definitely true. But this is where the votes take place. That big white board is lit up electronically, and it has everybody's names, and the Senate president sits up in the big chair and conducts the meeting. The door near the United States flag is the door to his office, and the door on the other side by the Arizona flag is the door to a conference room. If the majority party is out debating and voting and things are not going the way they expected, the leadership of the majority party might take you as a member if you're not behaving yourself or not in line, and they might take you in that room over there, the conference room, and that's where they put the rubber hose to you and say, what's your problem? How come you're not with the majority? We're trying to do something out here. So some of the arm twisting takes place there, out of sight of the public. The public does sit up here. We have a big gallery, and it doesn't really hold that many people. A lot of times it's absolutely full, especially with school children or other special interest groups that are wanting to know what's going on here. Below us, right off the floor of the Senate, is a private lobby. And it's where the word lobbyist comes from, right? And that's a members only thing, although If you are not a member, you can be invited in, but you have to be invited in. And oftentimes, while debate's happening on something that a member may or may not care about, they'll go in that lobby and talk to other lobbyists or get something to drink or whatever, because we generally don't allow it out here, food and drinks and that sort of thing. So it's a place to kind of stage up if you're not really interested in what's going on, if you're a member of the Senate. The pictures around the perimeter are the former Senate presidents that served here. As I say, we're a pretty young state, and so we're proud of our history, and we haven't really been around that long. When I was in the State House, I served with a woman that took her husband's place. Her husband was elected in 1920-something. She took his place in 1949, wow. And I served with her in 1989. She'd been there that long. I mean, that's like touching statehood practically, right? I mean, it's going all the way back to 1912 practically. Wow. So it is a new state, and it's proud of its independence. We think of ourselves differently than other states. We've our own uniqueness. We love our favorite Barry Goldwater and the reputation of rugged individualism and independent spirit type of thing politically. That's evolving a little bit as more people come to Arizona, and it's kind of too many Californians are coming here. But we still pride ourselves on that uniqueness.
So the districts that are represented here in the Senate, are they based on population?
Yes, it's a great question. There are 30 legislative districts in the entire state. The state is mapped in 30 places, 30 groups. And those groups are based on population. And by law, they're all supposed to be generally about the same population. We call it one man, one vote, so that everyone should be represented equally. Every 10 years, when the U.S. Census takes place and we recount everybody, the process of rearranging those boundaries takes place to balance. Some districts grow, others shrink, and the boundaries have to change. So some districts are giant geography in rural Arizona. Take hundreds of square miles of land where no one lives. So the district's very large, and it might be a number of rural towns which all add up together to something of a population. And other districts are very small. They're in the urban area where there's a lot of people in one confined space. But everybody's supposed to represent about the same number of people. That's the kicker. And it's a very political process. Yeah. The redistricting, we call it. It's a very political process. In fact, it used to be done by the legislature itself. But 25 years ago or so, there was a vote by the people of Arizona on the ballot to take that power away from the legislature, hand it to a supposedly independent 5-member group to try to do something beyond politics. Well, as it turns out, it has its own politics, and everyone knows it, and it didn't really cure anything, but the legislature doesn't draw its own boundaries. This independent group does. And again, it's a very political thing.
And what about the House of Representatives?
Exact same. As a matter of fact, in Arizona, of the 30 districts, there is one senator from each district and 2 House members from each district. In fact, the district's not cut in half for each house. They both serve everybody. And there's no separation, no difference between a Senate district and a House district. They're together. One senator, 2 House members. And when you run for office in Arizona for the House, you may be on the ballot with four people, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and the top 2 vote getters win. Just the top 2. It's not an A and B seat. It's like everybody's on the ballot, and the one with the most votes gets a seat, and the one with the second most votes gets a seat. And sometimes that's a Republican and a Democrat, and not just 2 Republicans or 2 Democrats. So it's a kind of a unique thing we do here.
And so are there any third parties or independents, either in the Senate or the House at the moment?
No, there are not. And there has been one in my 30-year history here, and it really wasn't real because she didn't get elected as one. She changed parties while she was here. But so far, no one has managed to get elected to the State House or Senate as an independent. To be honest, no one really tries. But that may change. I mean, things are evolving, and the parties themselves are changing, and not everybody's happy with it. And there might be an independent movement. The hurdle to get on the ballot, to actually get your name on the ballot, is higher for an independent because you don't have to go through a primary. You just go straight to the ballot. So that's one barrier. And another is culturally, we generally, they're long shot candidates. Most people want to vote for somebody in a party because they kind of have an idea of what they stand for. And an independent could be who knows what. So it's kind of hard to raise money and hard to communicate and that sort of thing. The State House, as I say, is a lot more chaotic, and this is where that action happens. The beauty of this room is, of course, the Grand Canyon panoramic, which is pretty new. It was done by the Speaker of the House before the one currently, only about 5 or 6 years ago. Before that was just blank walls. It's got brand new carpet. That's like, I've never even seen it. It's brand new, really. There are 60 desks instead of 30. The Speaker sits up there. His office is by the U.S. flag. The rubber hose room where they beat you up if you're not voting right is there on the other side. That's the Speaker's conference room. And it's a great place. It's self-governance. This is how we do it. Sometimes it's messy, but we have a lot of pride in this building, right here, this room.
Democracy is meant to be noisy.
Yeah, exactly. It's not supposed to be pretty.
Yeah.
When I was a member, I sat right down below us on the last row next to Representative Rosenbaum, Polly Rosenbaum, that we just saw. So we both sat right there, and it was fun. I, 27, her, I think she was in her 80s. Wow. And it was really like touching Arizona history. It was great. You see, it's relatively empty. We use it as a museum now. Our state seal is here on the floor. Our dome is modest, but once upon a time, the 3 branches of government were all in this building. And it wasn't until the 1960s, when the House and Senate we use now were built, that changed. The governor's office is now a tower that's behind us and above us that you can access by going through this hallway. But this is, during the day, normally filled with school kids and others trying to get a lesson about the original Capitol and all that. If we went to the second floor and went one side or the other, you'd see the original House and the original Senate chambers. And it looks a little bit like going back to grade school because the room's smaller and the desks are much smaller and the audience position is much smaller. And you say to yourself, how did they accommodate the public back then? Plus no air conditioning, right? I mean, when it was built, and this is a hot state. So I think that's one reason we wisely have our session during those perfect winter months, because they would just open the windows and it would generally be fine. So that's what they did.